Good morning or afternoon or evening or middle of the night, depending on when you are watching this. My LEPCS scholars, today we start the New England colonies. Tomorrow we will finish it. So please keep in mind that you are still using your outline notes technique. So make sure you're honing those skills and learning how to take those notes in an outline form, and make sure you are sharing those with me so that I can continue making sure that you are up to speed. Okay, so today we're going to go through a slideshow called the New England Colonies, Part 1. Key facts about the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims were separatists who wanted to break all ties with the Church of England. It says it pretty much right there. What a separatist is, it's somebody who wants to break away from something. Sometimes it's a government, sometimes it's a church, sometimes it's your family, whatever it is. But a separatist is somebody who wants to break away from something. And in this case, the Pilgrims wanted to break away from the Church of England. The Pilgrims arrived in America without a royal charter. A royal charter basically is a decree that the king is giving you or your people permission to take hold of a particular area. Some land, like in Pennsylvania, William Penn was given that entire area to govern. It was his. So basically, that's what that means. A royal charter means they are given permission by the king. To ensure an orderly government, 41 men signed an agreement known as the Mayflower Compact, pledging to combine ourselves together into a civil body politic. So that's important because even since they were not given a royal charter, as I stated above, they still wanted to make sure that they had a government. They had some order. Their decision to make political decisions based upon the will of the people established an important precedent or example for self-government in the British colonies. This is important for a couple of ways. One is that the government by will of the people, for the people, that sort of thing is really important once we get to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. And the other reason it's important is because it would also cause tensions and problems between the colonies and England itself, which would lead to the revolution. Here is the Mayflower. It is a replica, not the original Mayflower, but it's still kind of neat to see it. So key quote, John Winthrop's City Upon a Hill sermon. The setting. The Puritans were Protestants. Protestants are essentially Christians who are non-Catholic. And there are lots of different versions of Protestants, so we can talk about those at some other point. Who wanted to reform or purify the Church of England. In 1630, John Winthrop led a fleet of 11 ships and 700 Puritans destined to found the Massachusetts Bay Colony in New England. While on board the flagship Arabella, Winthrop preached a sermon describing his expectations for the new Puritan colony. Here is a quote from City Upon a Hill. For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God and his work, we shall have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us. We shall be made a story and a byword through the world. Now, I want you to read that a couple of times and think about what John Winthrop was saying with the City Upon a Hill. What was he saying? And there's going to be a little bit more on this, so please pay attention to this section. What was the significance? Well, the sermon expresses Winthrop's belief that the Puritan colonists had a special deal with God, that they were chosen by God to build a model Christian society. Winthrop's new Christian City Upon a Hill would serve as a symbol of righteousness that would inspire reforms in England. Righteousness. So basically, he believed that this new Christian land, this new Christian colony would be a place where spirituality would be most important, and that righteousness that goes along with it. And it would inspire people in England all the way across the ocean to do the same. That's what he had hoped for. Winthrop's sermon is often cited as the first example of American exceptionalism, which is the belief that America has a mission to be an archetype of democratic reform. Oh, excuse me. President Reagan often used this image back in the 1980s of a shining city to express his ideal of an America, God blessed and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. Puritan beliefs and values. Puritans were Calvinists, which is a type of Protestant, as I mentioned earlier, who believe that men and women are by nature sinful, and by God's grace, a few people are called the elect, and they will be saved. So God already decided who was going to be the elect and who will be saved and go to heaven. Because God is all-knowing, he has known from the beginning of time the identity of these lucky souls, and this doctrine is called predestination. Like other Protestants, the Puritans yearned to directly approach God. They wanted to talk to God directly. Therefore, they renounced the elaborate rituals of the Church of England and argued that the hierarchy of the church officials was unnecessary. That means hierarchy means levels. Each Puritan congregation was a self-governing church with membership limited to visible saints who could demonstrate the receipt of God's grace. Puritan beliefs and values continued. So the Puritans believed the Protestant work ethic. They taught their children that idle hands are the devil's workshop. And my grandmother used to say this all the time. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. What do you think that means? Idle hands. Idle hands means you're not doing anything. So what do you think that it means? Idle hands are the devil's workshop. So think about that. Unlike the early Chesapeake settlers, the Puritans migrated to America in families. Remember, the Chesapeake settlers, their main goal was to make money. Okay, they weren't there for profit. So most of the people that were there were men, very few women. So don't forget that. The Puritans lived in compact villages clustered around a community meeting house, such as the one on the slide, where they met to discuss local issues. Now, if you go to any small town in the United States, even now, there's often a place like this, like a little meeting house. And because a lot of our towns, especially in the Northeast, were developed based on this meeting house concept where people all got together and discussed what was going on in their communities. Puritans established a patriarchal society in which women and children played a subordinate role to men. In other words, a patriarchal society is a society where men were above women in society, essentially. So the men were making the decisions, the men owned the land and the buildings and everything, while the women helped out and played a supportive role. Puritans valued education as a means to read and understand the Bible. Believe it or not, before this time period, most people were essentially unable to read and write. They required each community of 50 or more families to provide a teacher of reading and writing. Harvard College was founded to train ministers. Harvard College is a huge university. The devout or devoted to religion or pious, if you've heard that term before, Puritans embraced a more rigorous faith than the Chesapeake settlers. Remember, the Chesapeake settlers were really there to make money, to make profit. The typical Puritan community was characterized by a closer relationship between church and state. What does that mean? That means that the church dictates what the government is doing. So they were essentially the government in that little community. Puritan leaders enforced a strict code of moral conduct. For example, communities in colonial New England banned the theater. So most of you should know what morals are. So that's knowing between, what's good and what's bad in society. But why would they ban theater? Just think about why would communities ban something like theater? What do you know about theater? What kind of expressions can theater represent or show? So think about that. And that's it for part one. Look out for part two tomorrow. Again, make sure you're doing your notes in the outline form, showing them to me, and then do your exit ticket today and get to work. I will see you later.